Good evening, everyone. We're here to continue with our study of In Divine Friendship, and we're in the last few sections of the book, but it'll take us a few weeks to get there. And Keshava was freed up from his other responsibilities on Tuesday night, so we have the pleasure of his chanting. So let's start with a prayer, and then we'll have a couple of chants and a little meditation before we begin. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Master Paramhansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, dear friend and guide Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to all. We are so grateful for your presence in our lives. We have a single prayer. Make us receptive. Help us to hear your inner guidance and give us the clarity and the courage to go forward in accordance with thy will. We were born for one purpose, which is to draw closer to thee. Help us to make this incarnation a divine success. Om. Peace. Amen.
Dark and my stars are gone. Though my sea is dark and my stars are gone, still I see the path through thy mercy. Still I see the path through thy mercy. I have made thee pole star of my life. I have made is dark and my stars are gone. Though my sea is dark and my stars are gone, still I see the path through thy mercy. Still I see the path through thy mercy. I have made thee pole star. I have made thee pole star of my life. Though my sea is dark and my stars are gone. Though my sea is dark and my stars are gone, still I see the path through thy mercy. Still I see the path through thy mercy. I have made thee pole star of my life. I have made thee pole star of my life. Though my sea is dark and my stars are gone. Though my sea is dark and my stars are gone, still I see the path through thy mercy. Still I see the path through thy mercy. I have made thee pole star of my life. I have made thee pole star of my life. Though my sea is dark far, farther than the stars. I may go far, farther than the stars, but I will be thine always. My Lord, I will be thine always. Devotees may come, devotees may go, devotees may come, devotees may go, but I will be thine always. My Lord, I will be thine always. When I die, look into mine eyes. When I die, look into mine eyes. They will usually say, I will be thine always. My Lord, I will be thine always. I may go far, farther than the stars. I may go far, farther than the stars, but I will be thine always. My Lord, I will be thine always. Devotees may come, devotees may go, devotees may come, devotees may go, but I will be thine always. My Lord, I will be thine always. When I die, look into mine eyes. When I die, look into mine eyes. They will mutely say, I will be thine always. My Lord, I will be thine always. I may go far, farther than the stars. I may go far, farther than the stars, but I will be thine always. My Lord, I will be thine always. Devotees may come, devotees may go, devotees may come, devotees may go, but I will be thine always. My Lord, I will be thine always. When I die, look into mine eyes. When I die, look into mine eyes. They will mutely say, I will be thine always. My Lord, I will be thine always.
Let's have a few moments of silent meditation now. Om, peace. Amen. Okay, my friends. So we are in the last letter of the section of this book called World Conditions. And this last letter is Swamiji responding to a journalist or a radio announcer, radio interviewer, who wanted him to talk about certain issues. And we got almost to the end of it, but we just didn't quite have time. It's the end of this letter and the end of the section. So Swamiji has already talked about, it was a talk show host who wanted him. Swami answered the question, what is the appropriate way to respond to our aggressors? This is September 13th, 2002. So it was the first anniversary of the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Center. So this is like revisiting that issue. This talk show host asking Swamiji his point of view. And he also said that he didn't want to go on the program because he didn't want to argue about these things. He felt they were just not subjects for argument. He has deeply held convictions, he'll express them. He doesn't want to try to argue and persuade someone. So the first one was how to respond to our aggressors, and we already read that. The second one was on the principle of nonviolence. So the third question was, how do we create peace? And Swami's answer is one line, 2 sentences. Work for peace. Don't work against violence. It's just like, that's really the whole thing. Swamiji says, if your goal is to create peace, you have to create a peaceful vibration while you're doing it. If you yourself are fighting and aggressive, and you say your goal is peace, he said it's never going to bring about peace because you're not emanating peace. And in the same context, I've told this story before, so I'll just remind you of it, when the people who were campaigning for a nuclear-free world, and there was an initiative on the California ballot having to do with, standing up against the proliferation of nuclear weapons. And they gave a presentation trying to win Swami's support and all of Ananda's support, which was all based on the horrific things that would happen to everyone if nuclear bombs were dropped. And Swami's comment afterwards is, war is created by aggressive people who are filled with fear often and they're trying to get power over other people. He said, if your goal is peace, fear is a very bad tactic. Because in the end, what you will create is more fear rather than the actual peaceful vibration. So work for peace. Don't work against violence. Now you have to think that one through a little more, but I'll just leave it there. So the question is about leadership style and philosophy of leadership. Swami answers in one paragraph. History teaches the need to learn cooperation, not competition and violence. Again, he says we should work for the good and not against evil. The evil will always be there. We aren't going to eradicate it, but we can strengthen the side of good. Leadership that seeks to advance a cause, not a person, is what is needed today. Well, there's a lot in this. This was 20 years ago. Leadership that seeks to advance a cause, not a person. In other words, what Swami is saying, regardless of what you paste over it, a person's real motives and a group's real intentions will simply reveal themselves. You know, politicians nowadays, they don't think anything of just changing their point of view as soon as the polls change. When Abraham Lincoln was president, I'm told, I read, occasionally there would be opinion polls to find out what the populace thought, but Lincoln would never change his policy according to other people's opinions. He knew what his policies were, he knew what his principles were, he knew what it was that he was, you know, had been literally born to present, and if people didn't understand what he was trying to do, then he just had to work harder to help them to understand. He didn't think that he should then surrender his principles for popularity. Now, of course, such integrity of position is, quite frankly, almost unheard of. People just play the edge of power and how to keep it for themselves. But at the same time, there is a lot of shadow in the world, and this is what Swami is saying. The evil will always be there. We aren't going to be able to eradicate it. Now, he doesn't bother to explain it, but it's the cosmic drama. And often I've referred to the yugas. In this particular stage in the yuga cycle, there is a certain balance of light and darkness. And fortunately, we are moving where there's going to be a gradual increase of light. But that doesn't mean that darkness will be eradicated, because it's a dual universe. The material world itself depends on duality. So our job is to try to create good. Oftentimes people work so hard to eradicate evil. I was talking to a friend and about a mutual friend, and they have the leisure and the capacity to get involved in trying to help the world. But interestingly, all the causes the person has taken up are things that they can be angry about. So really there's like an angry temperament, and now it's angry at this abuse and it's angry at that abuse, and thank God, you know, there are people working for that kind of change. But far better if we're working for the good, because otherwise the vibrations we put out are vibrations of my will dominating yours. And perhaps it's a slightly more elevated level, it might be even a massively more elevated level, but the idea of one willpower dominating another willpower is what we're struggling with. What we need to be working for is principles, and always have a clear idea of the principles that we're working for, not just the evil that we're trying to push back. In the process of working for those principles, we may increase the light, and the brighter the light, the farther away the shadow is pushed. And I always think of it as a shadow, because the shadow is something that blocks the light. The light is always present, but if we increase the brightness of the light, then the shadow gets pushed farther to the side. So Swami's now the last, an advice for world leaders. This is the last one. So Swami starts, I would say what I just said, that there is no way we can eradicate terrorism, because this is the anniversary of 9/11. If God hasn't been able to do it, I don't see how man can hope to. It's just a very interesting way to put it, isn't it? God has all the power in the world and the terrorists still exist. So there is some divine force here. If God hasn't been able to do it, I don't see how man can hope to. He, however, who created this world, surely knows how to run it. So we get into very interesting questions of philosophy, don't we? Terrorists, like everyone else, have lessons to learn. In their case, they need to learn to respect others' point of view, other points of view from their own, and to learn that they cannot force others to think just the way they themselves think. We too must reach that understanding. Now, don't mistake this to mean that, oh, well, the terrorists have a right to have their point of view, and who are we to say that they're wrong? They're clearly wrong. There are moral values in the world. There are divine principles that have to be maintained. But the question is not whether or not there are values to be maintained. It's the question of what is the most effective way to live by those values. And this business about terrorists also have lessons to learn. I've been thinking about that a lot at this particular juncture in planet Earth. It's that, and these are magnificent principles that we have to be willing to look straight at. Every soul is equally dear to God. This is something that Swami put into our Festival of Light. We say it every week. God is the same with all of us. He doesn't love Krishna and Jesus and the great saints more than he loves even those among us who have sinned most greatly, because we are all his children. But of course, when we reject the power of the light that the divine is putting into us, we suffer. And in our suffering, we often strike back. And so people get very misguided as to where their happiness is coming from. And if they have also developed power along the way, they can assert their misguided understanding with a tremendous amount of force. But what they are doing from the cosmic point of view is they're having the experiences they need in order to learn the lessons that they have to learn about how to find true happiness and avoid suffering. And as they learn those lessons, they're just like anyone else in the world. That Divine Mother gives us the free will to have these experiences. And everybody's karma plays into everybody else's. Evil people are having the opportunity to destroy. And light-minded people are having the opportunity to face their fear of the power of evil people. Because it's all divine, and bliss is the only reality. And as long as we're afraid, there's something more we have to learn and experience about the power of God in our lives. And a transition between Kali and Dwapara is a great opportunity for souls that need to destroy things in order to learn whatever it is they have to learn. So Divine Mother lets a bunch of them loose on the planet. And they're going to run around and destroy things. And they won't thrive. That doesn't mean that they'll be arrested or imprisoned or executed. But they won't thrive in the way that really matters, because if you impose suffering, then the obvious karmic balance is that suffering is imposed on you so that you can learn the lesson. Now, of course, that means that when suffering is imposed on anyone, that there's a divine lesson in it. And that's where the law of karma gets really challenging. But you can't have part of it without having all of it. And that is among the many things that happen during a time like this, when a lot of dark entities, dark souls, are given the opportunity to affect society as a whole. Those of us on the side of light get to face a lot of our fears. And in the end, all of this is to the good. In the short run, it can be struggle. It can be challenging. And I'm in it with everyone else. But I don't doubt the divine ultimate resolution of it. At least I haven't yet doubted it. And the more we're challenged, the more we'll see, won't we? So, In their case, they need to learn to respect other points of view from their own, and to learn that they cannot force others to think just the way they themselves think. We too must reach that understanding. You can't just impose your view. You can win people to it, perhaps, and if you can't win people to it, you can respond appropriately, which may be to restrain their energy and prevent them from expressing their evil. But that doesn't mean you can persuade them that your decision is the right one. My thought is we should work with those who are in agreement with our ideals and let God's love take care in His way of those who don't agree. Swamiji has often said that it's just folly to, he's talked about the United Nations as an example where we're trying to work cooperatively with regimes that have no interest in working cooperatively with us, that are just out for whatever they can get and are taking advantage of our goodwill, and the thought that we can just sort of keep being nice and have them respond nice is not likely. He said better that those of like mind who really have like values should band together in strength, instead of always trying to convert those who are not going to be converted. That's what he said. It's a lesson we ourselves also have to understand. We're not going to be able to force our values on other people, but we can gather those who share our values. This is advice to world leaders, bear in mind. This is something Swami said for a long time. If and when others see that harmony works, they will decide of their own will to behave likewise. Otherwise, the only way I can make them behave as I think they ought to is to force them to my point of view. If I did that, in what way, essentially, would I be any different from them? Now, Master has talked about a global police force. So it's not as if we never take a stand. But Swamiji is talking about trying to use our willpower to force others to a point of view. Again, it's a subtle point, which I think I've covered enough as I've come through all of this. There's one more answer I didn't see. Intentional communities. I think for the world that communities are the best way of working out questions of how to relate to others, to life, and to God. This is such a beautiful way to put it. I think that communities are the best way of working out questions of how to relate to each other, to life, and to God. I have lived in community for almost continuously for 50 years. Very small break between Ananda village and the establishment of this community. And quite truthfully, it solves so many of the dilemmas of our age. Loneliness, meaningful work, having friendships, having support in high values, having like-minded spirits around you, getting the benefit of shared spiritual practice, getting feedback from people whose wisdom you can trust, in ideally developing meaningful work together, working out life-work balance, simple living, economy of consumption because of cooperation. It's just, the list is endless. Most of the problems of our age would be solved with intentional, spiritually based communities. And I don't make that statement lightly. Master said it would be the social pattern of the future. And when that future will come, I don't know. Ananda's unique role has been to demonstrate how to form these communities and the enormous benefits of doing so and then living in them. And Swami has made the interesting statement that history will show, he said, that Ananda is one of the most important things going on right now, and that these communities eventually will, as Master said, the idea will spread like wildfire. We're hardly there, but I can see the rays of wisdom and light going forward, and the day will come. And I'm not doing it for that reason. I'm doing it for the fact that it's the most enjoyable and beneficial way to live I could ever imagine. But it pleases me to think we're also laying down a pattern that will be of great benefit to generations yet to come. In large social experiments, people have been coerced to abide by the theories of a few. The best solution is if small groups can work these things out, set a good example, and let others decide whether that example appeals to him. He's talking about politically motivated communal efforts, communism in Russia and in China, in Vietnam, and other places where it has been acted out, where a powerful government just comes in and moves people where it wants them to be and sort of has this theoretical plan about how people ought to live with each other and then forces people to do it, sometimes executing them if they don't cooperate, or starving them or imprisoning them. People don't accept new ideas on that basis. They may give in because they become helpless and frightened. Swami suggests just the opposite. Let the community itself demonstrate the efficacy of the way of life, and gradually people will be drawn. I've mentioned before that because I really started sort of in an alternate way of living path about 1965, which was quite a long time ago now, I've seen extraordinary changes in mainstream society, in addition to all the collapsing things I see. But there's this enormous understanding of things that when I was involved in them in 1965 and after, were just considered completely loony. But now everybody just accepts them as valid. The need, I mean, I use these examples, health foods, natural kinds of medicine, meditation, yoga practice, is spirituality inspired from the East? All of these things were very, very, well, lunatic fringe is my favorite phrase, but they were definitely on the outskirts, and they're not anymore. And nobody legislated it. No government drove in with tractors and forced us to do it. It's that one by one by one, people saw the benefit. And they saw the benefit, and they took it up, and then they influenced others, and consciousness is rising. So the community movement is going to be lifted on the wave of rising consciousness. How soon? I don't know. In our Ananda communities, we have shown that people can live by high ideals, love all, and have communal harmony. That is a useful lesson. Isn't that just so simple? In that way, we may be of practical service to those who feel in harmony with what we've done. You see how lightly Swami states that? We may be of practical service to those who feel in harmony with what we've done. He doesn't, even though he has profound faith in what we're doing, he believes Master's predictions and has divine expectations about the ultimate influence. Nonetheless, perhaps this will be of practical value for those who feel in harmony with it, because that's the only way change will take place. And even though we never try to convert, we don't try to evangelize, we let people know that we're here. We're not an esoteric society. The door is wide open, and we communicate in appropriate ways that everyone is welcome. But we don't chase people, and we don't grab them by the lapels and try to shout into their faces arguments for their changing their lives to look more like ours. We just try to be of some practical value for those who feel in harmony. And that in itself is Swami saying we're working for the good. And if we just keep working for the good, I mean, in the years that I've been involved with Ananda, it's grown from a very isolated, rather primitive rural community to a global movement in a very short period of time. So I've just watched it happening. And depending how long I live, I'll continue to watch it happening for a while, and we'll see how far it goes before I'm called to another plane. All of us will have that experience. Yes, I think that small, intentional, cooperative community are the best answer to today's needs. For one thing, they work. For what he's saying is, it's a practical idea. It actually can be implemented. It's not a pie-in-the-sky kind of theoretical dream. We had the idea, we put our hearts and minds and spirits into it, and look, we have these communities, and they work. For another, they invite imitation rather than demanding it. And this is in keeping with everything else Swami said. I've gone into this question in depth in my book, Hope for a Better World. I don't think in a quick interview that I could express myself at sufficient length to give a clear idea of what I mean. So he recommends to us the book, Hope for a Better World, the subtitle, The Small Communities Solution. And for those of you who are interested, I highly recommend that you take a look at it. He's also written a book called Intentional Communities, How to Start Them and Why. And both of those will take that subject much deeper. Well, ending with cooperative communities is a nice ending for world conditions, because instead of ending with the catastrophes, we're ending with the solution. In the movie Finding Happiness, which is a film that we helped produce about Ananda, at one point Atman, who's the community manager at Ananda Village, makes the simple statement, if everyone in the world lived the way we do in Ananda, we wouldn't have all these problems. We wouldn't have ecological problems, climate problems, war problems, health problems. We just wouldn't have them, because it would gradually put both our planet and ourselves back in harmony.